Hey y'all, this is Brown at IF Brown, and tonight I want to talk a little bit about a certain plot element from the novel Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, as well as from the movie of the same name directed by Steven Spielberg. So before I get into the main point, and just a little bit of background here. So Jurassic Park, the movie, is a straight up masterpiece. I mean, it's one of the best films ever made, in my opinion, and one of Steven Spielberg's best for sure. And it's iconic. I mean, there's so many memorable moments, so many classic lines, and some fantastic, special effects work by Stan Winston and his effects department. But, and of course, a very memorable cast as well. But the movie is something I was fortunate to have seen twice in the theater when I was a kid. The first time I saw it, my mom actually took me. Now, to be fair, she had watched the movie before I did, and I think part of it was because she knew I would like the movie because I love dinosaurs, but she wanted to make sure it would be safe for me to watch because at the time, when it came to PG-13 movies, I mean, she was more okay, than my dad and my stepmom were when it came to, me watching PG-13 movies. But still, she was kind of like, I think she was kind of like, she was wanting to make sure this wasn't going to be, too intense for me. Um, because a lot of people, when the movie was coming out, they were saying that it was going to be, one of the scariest films ever made, and it was going to be one of the bloodiest and goriest films ever made, or something along those lines. That's kind of what I remember at the time from what people were talking about. And in hindsight, they were probably saying that because they had read the novel Jurassic Park, and the novel is definitely full on nightmare fuel, albeit in the realm of science fiction. And when it comes to the blood and gore, oh boy. so, so had they made the movie as a straight up adaptation of the novel Jurassic Park, it would have been rated R for sure. They would not have been PG-13. So anyway, mom saw the movie, first, and she ended up telling me, yeah, we can go see it, because she was saying that it is scary at times, but it's not the scariest, thing that you're ever gonna see or something like that. And as far as like blood and gore, she said it wasn't that bad. But she and I went and saw it in the she took me to see it in the theater, and I loved it. I mean, there were definitely parts where I was on the edge of my seat. I mean, my God, like the scene with the T-Rex, going after the cars and chasing and the kids in the cars and all that, and Grant's telling him to be still. I mean, I still remember that stuff, and of course, Dennis Nedry, played by Wayne Knight, getting you know you know aced by the Dilophosaurus, uh, but yeah, which by the way in the book is a lot worse, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer character. So, which I always thought was funny because Wayne Knight, I mean, from what I've seen of him in interviews and stuff like that, he really seems like a cool guy, really, or nice guy in real life and everything, but his character Dennis Nedry is probably one of the most hated characters in cinema because of all the chaos he caused. Um, and so and then anyway, after my mom and I saw it, I was telling my dad and my stepmom about it, and I was telling them that hey guys, I mean, yeah, this is a great movie. Y'all are gonna love it. And honestly, I mean, yeah, it's scary, but it's not gory, like people were saying it was gonna be. And I don't remember if my dad had read the book, but I know he knew of the book, and so he had similar concerns as to a lot of other people that the movie was going to be as bloody and gory as the book. But when I was telling him that no, it's not, and so he and my stepmom and I went and saw it, and once again I had a blast, and they loved it too, and so we eventually ended up getting it on VHS, and so I mean the movie I've got a lot of fond memories of, um, and it wasn't until years later that I would read the book, and I found it. Um, the original copy I had, I think I got at a you know kind of like a garage sale or something, and I loved it. It was great. And when I finally got to read what and see what people were talking about in terms of, say, how scary the book was and how bloody and gory it was, I'm like, yeah, they were right. But unfortunately, that particular copy, I guess I kind of got too much wear and tear over the years, and so I had to get a new copy. Hence the brand spanking new copy I got about a month ago. But anyway, okay, so one of the things, there were a couple of things that were different, obviously, in terms of the book versus the movie. For one thing, I mean, as I mentioned, Dennis Nedry's death is a lot more explicit, and then John Hammond. Okay, so in the movie, John Hammond, I mean, he really comes across as an old man who is so passionate about bringing his childhood dream to the world, that being an amusement park where the public gets to interact with dinosaurs from millions of years ago, albeit ones that have been tampered with. I mean, they're already tampering with genetics when they're bringing the dinosaurs to life and growing them and creating them and cloning them and all that stuff, but they basically make some changes here and there to make it to where, I guess, the dinosaurs are more in their natural state, and as they were millions of years ago, as opposed to, say, dumbing them down, so whether they be safer for the public. But at the same time, though, I mean, you don't get the idea that he's an actively malevolent individual. He just, like, he comes across as a nice old man who does have a little too much ambition when it comes to realizing his dream. And there's a certain arrogance that comes out at key moments, but that arrogance, to be fair, is subdued. Like, it's present, but it's subdued. So to a point where, yes, a lot of this is his fault, because he's the one who, is behind the park's creation, and he's the one who pushed for certain developments before things were fully ready and what have you. But it doesn't come across as a corporate bastard or anything like that. I mean, he comes across as just someone who wants to bring his dream to life, but is naive in terms of how dangerous that could be. And of course, you have that memorable scene where they're having lunch or something at the table, and Ian Malcolm, I mean, they make a meme of it now, but I mean, where he's saying something along the lines of one of the things about such and such scientists is they don't when they don't stop to think whether that, like scientists, they could, when they could do something, they don't stop to think if they should do something. Now, obviously, it was written better than that, and Jeff Goldblum gave a better delivery. But I mean, you see the movie, and that particular moment really stood out because, I mean, at that point, I mean, John Hammond, from what we're seeing of him, not an actively malevolent individual, but at the same time, I mean, you do start to see some of the naivety that he has, and maybe just a touch of the arrogance, but not like full-on evil. And sure enough, as the movie goes on, he realizes where he went wrong. I mean, the guy has remorse and everything, like he owns up to his actions. And so yeah, I mean, he doesn't, like, a lot of the problems come from him because he's behind it all, the park's creation, but he's not a bad person, just a ignorant and naive one, and overly ambitious. But now the book, on the other hand, he's still a nice old man, but that's all just surface level. Like, beneath it all, he's a corrupt old bastard, and yes, he has these two grandkids that he seemingly adores, but the thing is, he doesn't adore them. He just uses them to get, I don't know, cute points or brownie points or sympathy points from potential investors, that kind of thing. Whereas in the movie, he actually loved them. He actually loved his grandchildren. Um, but no, I mean, you find out in the book, though, that John Hammond's basically undercutting, just about every safety measure that, you know, the park has, to where it's like, it should be, this effective in terms of, how safe it is, but now it's only that effective. I mean, like there's even before the main characters, get to the park, you know, you get the idea that there's been, quite a few, workers that have been killed by, you know, various dinosaurs in the park, that kind of thing. And some of them even got out of the park, you come to find out. And that's all at the beginning of the novel before the main characters, really get involved. But okay, so the character of Robert Muldoon, though, this is what I really want to talk about. Robert Muldoon, both in the book and the movie, is a very memorable character. So, as played by the late Bob Peck in the movie, I mean, you know, you watch him on screen, and this is a guy who's seen some shit. Okay, I mean, Bob Peck just sold it, and so, when you have a guy who's that um, experienced in when it comes to say, you know, tracking and being a game warden and all, trying to tell the main characters and John Hammond that the raptors should all be destroyed. I mean, even if you hadn't seen that scene at the very beginning, with the whole shoot her, that part, I mean, even if you hadn't seen that scene, just based on, the sincerity and, the intensity, the subdued intensity that Bob Peck brings to that, delivery, you're kind of like, okay, I haven't seen the Raptors yet, but, and that's assuming I haven't seen, the opening scene, but let's say for argument's sake I hadn't, but I only had, Bob Peck's, Muldoon to, go off of. I'm be like, okay, I haven't seen the Raptors yet, but I think we might want to listen to this guy, So, but yeah, Bob Peck, I mean, he was just great in the part, and he really, you really bought that his character, knew what he was talking about, and had, you know, been through all kinds of shit, and this was something that was a whole new level, you know. And one of the things about, the movie is that, his character is established as, very experienced, very much of a badass, as far as, professional, trackers or hunters go. And so, when his character ends up getting killed, by the very same raptors, he, has this, hatred for, it's a very unforgettable moment, because, it's one of those bits where, you're taking a character that's established as a badass, and, just based on, this, the stuff that, we've seen with him and the stuff that he's talking about and everything, this guy, is a legit professional. And so when he gets killed in the way he does, namely, he thinks that he's hunting one of the raptors, but he ends up getting flanked, and you get that classic clever girl, and then he kills him, and so very, very nerve-wracking, moment in the movie for sure, and it was a very memorable death scene, and it went to show that, I mean, it definitely amped up the danger, because, I mean, at that point, things are already bad, but when Robert Muldoon ends up getting killed, I mean, that's when you're like, oh God, excuse me, sorry, things get really bad. But in the book, though, his character is just as much of a, certified badass in terms of, life experience in his field and everything. But the thing is, he actually lives in the novel, and he actually kills at least two velociraptors that I remember, with a rocket launcher. Okay, so one of the things that that they touch on is the fact that John Hammond cares more about the dinosaurs, about his about his dream to have this wonderland for the public, albeit one that he's in complete control of. But ironically, he's losing control this whole time because he's refusing to, you know, pay up, for like proper safety measures and things like that. And one of the things that they talked about in the book was, one of the scientists, had, wanted to, quote unquote, dumb the dinosaurs down to make them more docile and more safe for the public to interact with. But John Hammond was like, no, no, I want these to be the real deal. I want them to be, just as, you know, just as, primitive as the real thing. And so, of course, primitive, being more savage. And then which explains how you get raptors and T-Rexes that are, you know, full on malevolent instead of just, predatory. Like these dinosaurs, like the raptors and the T-Rex especially, I mean, you kind of get the idea that they enjoy what they're doing. They're not just, doing it for food. Like they're, torturing and killing people, or they're torturing people before they kill them, that kind of thing. Or they're psychologically, messing with them before, killing them. So yeah, and one of the other things that John Hammond was stringent on was firepower. So firepower in this case being something that is powerful enough to take out a velociraptor in one shot, namely a rocket launcher. Because Muldoon, I mean, he's clashed heads with Hammond so many times about it, but and he tells some of the other characters that the way that the dinosaurs are, especially with raptors, or he's focusing on the raptors as an example, but dinosaurs in general apparently have a nervous system that's displaced in such a way to where you could have a whole limb blown off of them and they'd still be going. I mean, they would bleed out eventually, but not before they come after you and most likely kill you. So I mean, if you're gonna shoot one of them with that much firepower, it better be a killing shot. Okay, and so and he's even pointing out how they can take multiple rounds of bullets too, and even headshots wouldn't kill it right away, depending on the type of guns you're using. And so he's basically is trying to say, hey, we need something on hand in case these things get out, because they've already killed some of the workers. And Hammond had basically said, no, 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 I'm not going to jeopardize my dinosaurs, blah, blah, blah. And so, Muldoon threatened to quit. And so, since there wasn't any other professional game warden that had Muldoon's real world experience on hand, John Hammond reluctantly acquiesced and was gracious enough to give Muldoon and his security staff one rocket launcher, albeit with, I think it was six rockets. I think it was six. It's been a bit, but I want to say like 6 rockets. But just one rocket launcher, okay. And so, but yeah, certain certain plot developments transpired wherein Muldoon with Gennaro, the lawyer, yeah, in the book, Gennaro's actually a lot more competent, than his movie counterpart, and he and Muldoon actually end up kind of becoming, friends, sort of like a strange buddy cop duo almost, because there's this the part where they're driving around the park in one of the jeeps, and Muldoon's driving, and he's had more than a few um, drinks, and you get the idea that he's kind of drinking to cope with the stress of it all. But once they come upon the raptors, he he's gets Gennaro to load the rocket launcher for him, and he takes out one of them for sure, like with the rocket launcher. I mean, full on blown to smithereens, which gets the attention of the rest of the pack, and they have to hightail it out of there. Um, but there is a point though where he ends up getting separated from some of the characters. After it's been a long time since I read the book, but basically he ends up being chased by the raptors again, and ends up in a pipe of some kind, like a drainage pipe, I think, and they're the raptors are blocking his escape, but at the same time, they're not able to get in, but he's able to sort of position himself to where he's there's like a standoff, and he's able to hit another one of them, but this rocket just blows the leg off of this particular one. And so eventually, though, he is able to get out of there. I forgot what drove the raptors away or what got their attention, but he is able to get out of there eventually. But he had also succeeded in tranquilizing a T-Rex. And once again, Gennaro was helping him load, and they were using the rocket launcher to fire like tranquilizer darts, and he actually missed a couple of times because of the sighting. But I think it was like on the third try, one of the darts hit the T-Rex, and because of how big this thing is, I mean, it takes a long time for the drugs to kick in and knock the T-Rex out. But the thing is, it's implied that by Muldoon doing that, by him hitting the T-Rex with that particular dart, with the sedatives in there and everything, even though it was a very delayed reaction, there comes a point where this T-Rex is chasing some of the characters in the water, but then suddenly it just kind of seems to fall asleep and go under the water, and you don't see that T-Rex again. So either the T-Rex was able to sleep it off, or it drowned. And the way they talk in the book, it's leaning more towards that T-Rex drowned. So Muldoon, for sure, like he killed one raptor for sure, and it's heavily implied that the other raptor that he blew the leg off of is gonna bleed out. Okay, I mean, strangely dispersed, nerve system or no, I mean, you get a whole limb blown off with no medical attention, and I mean, yeah, you might be able to, hop around for a time, but then, yeah, I mean, you're gonna bleed out and die. So, but yeah, as far as the T-Rex goes, I mean, that was definitely something that didn't happen in the movie. But I mean, once again, because of Muldoon's actions, I mean, he, in a roundabout way, not only may have indirectly killed the T-Rex, if this T-Rex did indeed drown, but this also indirectly saved the lives of the characters that the T-Rex was going after in the water, that was chasing them in the water. So, and I want to say that that particular raptor, the one that Muldoon blew the leg off of, may have had a go at Gennaro, later on in the book, and Gennaro is actually able to sort of manhandle it like in an act of pure adrenaline, and you know throw it off of him, and I mean, and he's able to hightail it out of there, but or where he's at and everything, and but he's saying something along the lines of something was wrong with its leg, and and when when in the book, when they're talking about Muldoon having taken the leg off of one of those raptors, you kind of put two and two together, and you get the idea that, yeah, it was that particular raptor that had tried to attack Gennaro, but the way it was described in the book, it was, clearly hurt. And, once again, I mean, you have something with the whole limb being blown off with no medical attention, yeah, it's going to bleed out eventually. So for sure, Muldoon directly killed one raptor with a straight up, shot, and then indirectly killed another, with blowing the leg off of this one particular raptor, and, more than likely indirectly, killed a T-Rex too. So Muldoon was definitely a badass in the book. I mean, he was cool in the movie too. I mean, Bob Peck did a great job playing him, but and had a very memorable death scene. But in the book, though, I mean, this guy was a straight up badass. I mean, in the fact that he was able to, not only kill, these fierce predators while hammered, in order to cope with the stress of the situation, but he also is one of the survivors of the book, which I was like, yes, but. Yeah, so when it comes to the movie, though, there is a lot of talk there's been a lot of talk over the years as to, why Muldoon's character, died the way he did, whereas in the book, he lived. And one of the things that is brought up is that, Bob Peck had some kind of cancer, and there was some people say it's straight up fact. Some people say it was rumors, but I mean, he did have cancer. But the story goes that the cancer was so severe that he felt that he didn't have a lot of time left, and so there was talk about making a sequel to Jurassic Park, because of how big of a deal it was. And this is before the movie's completed, mind you, okay? And if I remember correctly, like I've heard that like in the original screenplay for the movie, it is more similar to the book in the sense that Muldoon lived, but for one reason or another, they changed it to where his character died. And so the rumor was that because Bob Peck had the whatever type of cancer it was he had, I mean, as far as I can tell, they haven't really disclosed what kind of cancer it was, but he, he felt that if the movie was as successful as, they all thought it was going to be, they were wanting to make a sequel, I mean, because this is Spielberg, dinosaurs, and, all that. But he, according to the rumors and stories, he, actually talked with Spielberg and requested that his character be killed off because, he didn't want to, be put into a position where, he's dying of cancer, but they're wanting to bring him back for a sequel, that kind of thing. And so, on the surface, I mean, it's an understandable, it's understandable, and you could actually kind of buy that theory, but unfortunately, I mean, it's sort of like he said, she said. I mean, some people are saying that was just rumor, some people are saying it's fact, so it's kind of hard to tell exactly why. But Bob Peck, unfortunately, did have cancer, though, and but he wasn't. It wasn't revealed until 1994, which, if I remember correctly, was like a year after the movie was made. And so, I mean, it's possible that he knew he had cancer, but he didn't go public with it until 1994, and he actually lived until 1999. So, had that been the case, I mean, if Bob Peck, asked Steven Spielberg, to kill his character off, in order to avoid the difficulties of, being obligated to appear in a sequel, but not being able to because he's dying of cancer. I mean, that would make it ironic because, I mean, if the fact that he lived until 1999, that meant that, I mean, they very well could have, made a sequel. I mean, we're talking like, say, maybe something other than The Lost World or something like that. They could have hypothetically had him in a sequel and still be able to play Robert Muldoon, if that was the case, okay? So another theory, though, and this one, I feel more inclined towards, okay? So take what I say with a grain of salt, but the other theory that's been floating around is that, they were going to go with, Muldoon, being more like he was in the book, like when they were doing the movie, because, I mean, it's been said multiple times, I still need to, I haven't read the original screenplay, but I've heard from multiple people that in the original screenplay, Muldoon actually does live. But so if I've heard incorrectly about that, please tell me. But anyway, this other theory is that he was going to live, as he did in the book, but they wanted to really sell the fact that, that they wanted to sell, the whole cautionary, tale aspect of the movie, and the fact that, man's arrogance, brought about, his own doom, by tampering with, life forms that he, knew a lot less than he thought he knew about. Hence, the dinosaurs being as, dangerous as they are, and all the horror that ensues. And so it's like part of that was, okay, we're already gonna, put the audience through a ringer with, the whole T-Rex scene, and we've already, got their attention, with, the opening scene, with the raptor killing that, park worker and the whole shoot her, bit, so, what can we do? I mean, we already know Nedry's gonna die, so what can we do to really, sell the horror of the situation to where, hope is in short supply? And so, it's like, well, you take a character who's established as a certified badass and, well, you kill them off. And that theory, I think, carries a little more weight. Or at the very least, that feels like something that the creative team, like the writers and the director, and maybe Bob Peck himself, all may have, talked about and said, you know what, yeah, this really would sell the horror angle of the movie, and you would really emphasize the whole cautionary tale aspect of the movie too, because, I mean, here's a guy who, I mean, yeah, he definitely, knows his quarry. I mean, he understands raptors, but, as skilled as he is, I mean, there's the, inescapable overconfidence that comes with, man. And so, or it's just being a part of the human race. And it's like we tamper with stuff that we shouldn't tamper with, or, we think we know more about something than we really do, only to find out that, we were wrong, or we didn't know as much as we thought we did. And so, Robert Muldoon's death, really works in that way. And so I could buy the notion of them, handling, Muldoon's, death like that in order to really, sell the cautionary tale aspect of the movie, as well as to, make the audience, feel like, hope was in, even shorter supply than they thought it was, and the danger was a lot more real, that kind of thing. So I don't know for sure exactly why they killed his character off, but those are the main theories that I've come across, like reading about stuff online and what have you. But myself, I mean, I was initially kind of like a lot of people, thinking that it was because of the cancer that, and he asked it for his character to be killed off. But then when you look a little more into it, there's a lot of stuff also saying that that was mainly gossip. And so, I've gotten to where I'm more inclined to the other theory, and the fact that they decided to have him killed off in order to further sell the horror of the, situation. But at the same time, you know, and I get it. I mean, if that's the case, I get it, and they succeeded for sure. But at the same time, if you've read the book and you've seen just how badass he is, and having been able to, take a stand against the raptors and everything with a rocket launcher, and to, possibly kill a T-Rex with, a rocket launched tranquilizer dart. I mean, it does come across as a little disappointing in terms of how his character's story ends in the movie. I mean, because he's a great character. I mean, Bob Peck does a good job, and you have good writing and good direction and everything, and his death really sells the horror of the situation. But at the same time, you know I was disappointed in the fact that his character, didn't get to show, his badass credentials from a combat, standpoint. It's kind of like, with in the movie Aliens, you got the colonial Marines. They go in completely underestimating the situation, and they get their asses kicked. But at the same time, though, they don't go down without a fight. I mean, they clearly, kill several of the aliens, in the initial confrontation. I mean, but more of them get wiped out, though. And so you get a reduced, cast of characters as a result of, underestimating the threat of the situation. And but the point is, they clearly went down fighting. Okay, and I wish that they had taken a similar approach with Muldoon's character as far as the movie. Like, I think they could have kept the whole idea of killing his character off to further sell the horror of the situation, but at the same time, I feel like they could have, shown a little more respect to the source material as far as he was concerned, in terms of, say, maybe having his character being able to, go down fighting. Like, if they could have, maybe done some, sort of take on, the whole idea of him being able to, kill a velociraptor by blowing it up with a rocket launcher and, wounding another. Or because this was like a, summer blockbuster, I mean, they could have maybe amped the action up some. They could have maybe had him, kill one or two with a rocket launcher, but then, suddenly, there's the pack swarming him, and he doesn't have time to reload, and so he resorts to something like a shotgun, and in him being as skilled as he is, I mean, he's able to take out maybe two or three of them with the shotgun. Or okay, two's probably a more realistic expectation for that situation, considering how fast those freaking things are. But the point is, I mean, we could have had it to where Muldoon, like when he's trying to draw the raptors off of Ellie like he originally was in the movie. I mean, we could have had it to where instead of like getting outflanked, I mean, he's onto them, and he blows one of them up with a rocket launcher, and kind of buys himself some time, and gives the audience a false sense of hope. Like, hey, I mean, this guy's clearly going to make it. I mean, he's got full on military grade firepower here. But then again, we're talking about raptors who are able to coordinate when it comes to attacking and hunting, and these are raptors who have been basically amplified in terms of like the genetic stuff that the scientists did to them. And so, I mean, these are, I mean, by itself, I mean, Muldoon had a chance, I think. Like, if it was just one-on-one, and he was heavily as armed as he was in the book, yeah, I mean, he definitely has a chance to make it out. But when you've got one guy being swarmed by them, yeah, he's probably going to die, albeit not without taking a few of them with him first. And so I just wish they could have done something like that, to where, I mean, like he's got maybe three, say like three or he's able to get like 3 or 4 rockets, on him, and he's able to use, I don't know, 2 of them before the raptors get too close, and he's not able to reload in time, and then he's having to, resort to using the shotgun, which allows him to, kill 2, maybe 3, but I'm thinking more 2, so it's based on how fast and intelligent those things are. But then inevitably, though, I mean, he'd either run out of ammo, or you know they get to him before he could draw on another one, that kind of thing. And then you'd get another version of the whole clever girl bit, but and I think it would work in the sense that you're still selling the raptors as a threat, but you're also not underselling Robert Muldoon's capabilities, as a fighter, or as a guy who's been in the shit, and you know and this is a guy that isn't just all talk. This guy is able to kick ass and take names, but at the end of the day, he's just one guy with a limited supply of ammo, and going up against a pack of intelligent dinosaurs, and so yeah, I just that was the main thing I was just wanted to talk about a bit. Like I just the movie is still a great movie, and Bob Peck, once again, he did a great job, and it's a great moment when his character meets his end. But at the same time, having read the book and really liking what they did with his character in the book, and him being able to actually fight back and make it out alive, I do wish they could have had a compromise in the movie, where, I mean, his character still dies, to really sell the horror of the situation. But at the same time, we get to see that he wasn't just all talk. I mean, this guy was able to put up a fight and, make sure that he didn't go out alone, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, the Raptors would still get him, to sell the horror of the situation. So it's like, I think it would probably work as an idea that, yeah, man is dangerous, but these raptors, or dinosaurs in general, are worse, so. But yeah, that's I just wanted to kind of shoot the breeze on that, and I guess you could say kind of geek out a bit. But yeah, y'all got any questions or comments or thoughts about Jurassic Park or raptors or Muldoon? Feel free to drop a line and give me some feedback. I'd love to hear it. But thanks for taking the time to check out this video, and if you made it this far, I appreciate it. So y'all have a good night. Take care. Bye.